Tira Panachar Vijaya Radha Madhava Kunjabiha Vijaya Radha Madhava Kunjabiha Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Nandana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachar Yamuna Tira Vanachar Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Vishnupada Prahamsa Virchakacharya Shadasada Srimad Divine Grace AC Bhaktivedanta Swamiraj Prabhupada Ki Jai. This confounded Triheshwar Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Vishnupada Prahamsa Virchakacharya Shadasada Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Granthraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Brahmanande Haribo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 30, entitled The Activities of the Prachetas, text number 47. Tatra Vishishta Ye Vriksha Vita Tuhitaram Tada Ujjaruste Pratitobaya Upadishta Swayambhuva Patra Vishishta Ye Vriksha Vita Duhitaram Pada Ujjaraste Pratitobya Upadishta Swayambhuva Tatra Vashishta Ye Viksha Bita Duhitram Tada Ujjaruste Prachetobhya Upadishta Swayambhuva Tatra there Avashishta remaining Ye which Riksha trees Bita being afraid Duhitram their daughter Tada at that time Uchuru delivered te they Prachetobhya onto the Prachetas Upadishta being advised Swayambhuva by Lord Brahma. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The remaining trees, being very much afraid of the Prachetas, immediately delivered their daughter at the advice of Lord Brahma. The purport. The daughter of the trees is referred to in text 13 of this chapter. This daughter was born of Kandu and Pramlocha. The society girl Pramlocha, after giving birth to the child, immediately left for the heavenly planets. While the child was crying, the king of the moon took compassion upon her and saved her by putting his finger into her mouth. The child was cared for by the trees. And when she was grown up by the order of Lord Brahma, she was delivered to the Prachetas as their wife. The name of the girl was Marisha, as the next verse will explain. It was the predominating deity of the trees that delivered the daughter. It was the predominating deity. The trees are a little different. In this connection, Srila Jiva Goswami Prabhupada states, Vriksha Tad Adish Pater Devata. The trees means the controlling deity of those trees. In Vedic literature, we find that there is a controlling deity of the water. Similarly, there's a controlling deity of the trees. The Prachetas were eagerly the Prachetas were engaged in burning all the trees to ashes, and they considered the trees their enemies. To pacify the Prachetas, predominating deity of the tree under the advice of Lord Brahma delivered the daughter Marisha. Om Ginataramandasya Ginanjana Shlakaya Chakshumi Tamyana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in this verse, it's talking about how the daughter of Pandun from Locha, named Marisha, was delivered to the Prachetas to be their wife. And in the purport, it tells us a bit about her past, that she was abandoned in the forest. The king of the moon took pity on her. He felt compassion for her and gave her some sustenance, some means of survival. And to make sure she was properly cared for, of course, we read in the Vedic literature that the moon nourishes vegetable life, different forms of vegetation. So in one sense, the moon can be considered as presiding over uh, vegetation as well, or at least closely related. So the king of the moon, the demigod in charge of the moon, delivered the child to be cared for by the trees. And as uh, Prabhupada, quoting Jiva Goswami, says, this means the controlling deity of the trees. It's not like the moon god just went up to a random tree and placed the kid on the roots and was like, here you go. Uh, now it's explained that when we say the trees, we mean the controlling the when we say the trees did something, we mean the controlling deity of the uh narration talked or something. It's talking about the presiding deity of the ocean because everything has presiding deities. And to the modern mentality or to the modern worldview, this might seem very fantastical. We don't talk in the modern world about the consciousness underlying the various laws of nature. Uh, it's actually a very niche field to be talking about consciousness in science or philosophy at all. Uh, because what is accepted, uh, yes, by scientists and philosophers, but by the general populace as well, is that things have to be so-called normal. We want to have some normal system of understanding, some normal system of uh, cosmic and people reject some fantastical invention and as mythology that somebody made up many years ago, or maybe they're based on real people. The story got embellished, etc. But in any case, people want to accept a normal explanation for everything. It actually comes to mind a long time ago. I remember seeing several shows uh, on the History Channel where they try to give naturalistic uh, explanations for the 10 plagues as told in the Bible that struck Egypt. Um, Instead of just saying, oh, this was miraculous, this was a miracle, they say, no, it's because a volcano erupted in some other part of the world and that drove the frogs out and uh, like the firstborn were getting more food than other people, so and it was poisoned apparently, and etc. But the point is that people want to accept a naturalistic or so-called normal explanation instead of one involving demigods and things like that. Uh, I was thinking at least, Jiva Goswami clarifies that when we say the trees, we mean the deity that's in charge of the trees. This is a bit better. We're not talking about an actual tree uh, holding a conversation with somebody or uh, a child or anything like that. But to modern abilities, saying that there's a demigod that the child was handed over to better. But we have to ask, as normal and what do we accept as fantastical? As I've been saying, the modern world, the modern worldview, does not accept demigods as a normal course of action, or not a course of action, a normal system or a normal event or phenomenon or type of entity. Instead, we take the impersonal view as normal, that everything is working in a clockwork manner, almost deistic sort of sense, that yeah, maybe there is, maybe not, there is somebody at the beginning to wind up the clock, but after the clock was set in motion, he does not interfere in the affairs of etc. Although even this mentality breaks down when people uh, see suffering. Uh, People have this idea like, oh, if there is a God, he just set the universe in motion and then let it run. But when something bad happens to them, uh, many times they don't, blame the laws of physics. They blame God. And how could you let this happen? If how's there evil in the world if you're uh, you know, good and powerful and all knowing, etc. Uh, so most people do not accept the demigods. And one of the main reasons for this, there are several reasons. One is that we are only going by our own experience. Uh, it's described in this verse and in other verses around here, the various personalities that we're dealing with. That the Prachetas lived under the water for thousands of years, that there's a daughter that can be raised by the demigod of the trees, and that Lord Brahma comes. Lord Brahma is, of course, famous for uh, riding a swan carrier uh, that he takes from one planetary system to the other. And all of these things are uh, hard to accept for people just going off the normal conditioning or the normal way of experience. One time Prabhupada was asked, he talked or mentioned at one point, his lecture, that Brahma uh, has a swan carrier, that the vehicle by which he goes from one place to the other, sometimes across planetary systems, is swan-like, or it's just sometimes specifically said to be a swan. And somebody asked him, are we meant to take this basically to represent something in and it's all an elaborate uh, to teach us whatever lesson that the author wants us to teach. And Prabhupada said, no, it's actually is a swan carrier. And you can accept it because, in his words, uh, and you can't accept it in your teeny brain. Because we are actually very limited in our experience. Everybody is always limited in their experience, actually, at least on the material platform. because there simply isn't enough time to experience everything. This is the issue with Pratyaksha Praman, with the system of knowledge or the system of gaining knowledge that relies on direct experience and sense perception. Even if one has very good senses, very powerful senses, one cannot perceive everything. And even if one could perceive everything, one does not have the time to go around and trying to do this. So the issue with us looking at these things with the modern person or person with the modern sensibilities looking at these things is that we actually have a very small experience of the universe. Our experience is limited first to one planet. And even in this planet, our experiences are so variegated. Somebody who is a billionaire is having a very different experience than somebody who is living in poverty in the third world, for example. The standard of living is just extremely different. The experiences are extremely different. And from one's own experience, one cannot know what it is like to live in the other position. So somebody who is a billionaire can not through his own experience be able to understand what it is like to be an impoverished person in Africa, for example. And such a person, such an impoverished person, cannot, through their own experience, understand what it means to be a billionaire because the experience is limited. We do not have unlimited experiences in this material world. Of course, there is a way that those people can understand, and that is by hearing. If one hears from the other about their experiences, then they can understand each other and know what it is like, uh, to a certain degree at least, depending on the skill of the person telling, to live in the other person. Uh, so that is the way to overcome this problem of limited experience, is Shabda Pramani, hearing from recognized sources. But this, of course, requires us to accept somebody as a proper authority. That so Shabda Praman really depends on consciousness and on personhood and individuality. If there was uh yes, was somebody who uh wanted to learn something that they cannot experience themselves, they have to approach somebody who, in this respect at least, is, one could say, superior to them, at least in knowledge of this particular thing. But this is a personalist uh, process, really speaking, because one has to approach another person to gain the knowledge. But everything in the modern world, more or less, is impersonal. We see this through the technologies that we use. Uh, all these various technologies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., that purport various people around the world with friends, relatives, strangers who we think might laugh at our jokes. Uh, but really it's impersonal. We're not actually building a relationship with anybody when we do these things. And then also, of course, the philosophical underpinnings of more or less all of the modern theories. Uh, the underlying philosophy, or even meta philosophy, you could call it, is that it is impersonal, that there is no person behind the uh, cosmic manifestation, behind the creation, maintenance, or annihilation of the universe. And I think there are several reasons for this. Of course, different people might have different reasons for accepting these theories, but I think one reason that people have is that this satisfies their need or their desire to be irresponsible. If there is a supreme controller, somebody who is in charge of everything, then we are answerable to that supreme controller. But this kind of cramps our style if we want to engage in intense sense gratification. If we want to do that, then we want to be the uh, arbiter of good and evil. That basically we want to kick out any sort of personal conception of God, because we don't want the, one could say, judgment, or one possibility of acting in line with his will. And of course, many people as well are envious. This material world is a place of envy. We don't want anybody above us. Um, yes, so we don't want uh, anyone uh, above us. Uh, and this is prominent as well, of course, in material philosophies, that we do not wish to have a person who is superior to us in any way. So we basically just say that there is a impersonal force or impersonal nature behind all of this uh, cosmic manifestation. Basically, it's a compromise. It's like, well, I can't be God, so nobody else can be God either. They do not want to accept that, yes, there is uh, God, and there is uh, the Jiva, and that they have an eternal relationship where the Jiva serves Krishna, serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the modernist view, impersonal view, while the Vedic view is a person. But one should recognize that for any facts, for any set of facts that we obtain, say through experimentation or perhaps through observation, there are always many possible interpretations of this fact. Of course, which I recognize as well, this doesn't just apply to the kind of academic or intellectual sphere, but even in our day-to-day lives, we can recognize that for any fact or for anything, situation that we see, there are many possible interpretations to that fact. For example, uh, if I see some I didn't clean something in the kitchen, for example. I could have the interpretation like, oh, this person is so lazy, or I could have the interpretation, oh, they're doing so much other service that they forgot to do this, or they are, or something like that. Uh, but in the uh, so I guess, yeah, in the intellectual side, or on the intellectual side, one is able to give a personalist interpretation of the various observations and experiments that people make. And uh, in many cases, one is actually able to explain the evidence better from a personalist account. But the only philosophy that is given any philosophy, even the theologians, even many other uh, people in various traditions, uh, for example, many modern apologists, they might say they believe in a personal God, but when the way that they explain, the way that they talk about him, it remains very impersonal. Has no body, he has no arm, he doesn't get hungry, he doesn't have activities really, other than occasionally intervening on behalf of his devotees, is on behalf of the faithful, on people. In many cases, people do not view it as a personalist. In a personalist, even if they do, it is not as complete found in the Vedic literatures, for example. But one can make a very strict consciousness, as say personalism, are the foundation of reality. That instead of the modern view that consciousness comes the brain, uh, one can make the case that consciousness is actually fundamental to the world. And the various reasons that one can think about. Actually, the only thing that one knows for certain is that one is conscious. Uh, Quote by Descartes, cognito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. Even if every illusion, if we are in some, we're just a brain in a vat, that we are living this life, and that everybody else is just figments of our imagination, that I cannot be a figment of my own imagination. So we know at the start that the only thing that we are sure of is that consciousness exists. Uh, and then somebody could say, okay, we know that consciousness exists, but it still might come from matter, might be electrical signals in the brain, is the current theory. But one can see that, or one can make the case that consciousness does not have a physical basis. And this is not, one can, of course, make philosophical base arguments about this as well, but one can also just make a purely scientific argument that consciousness has no physical basis. There are certain people who have a condition called hydrocephalus. where basically various degrees, various percentages of their brain is replaced simply by liquid, by water, more or less. And there are some very staggering examples of this, where people with less than 1% of a brain are fully conscious, able to go about their day. One of the main researchers for this, Dr. Lorber, is alive in the last century, um, even had people with this condition who were high performing academics, mathematicians, etc., all without a brain. So this indicates that consciousness is might be non-physical, might be uh, something other than the firing of neurons. Of course, one could, if one is a materialist and wants to stick to one's guns, uh, one could say, okay, maybe the brain isn't the seat of consciousness, the generator of consciousness, but maybe something else is. Okay, you can make that argument. I'm not sure what else in the body is complicated enough to even have a chance of making a of manifesting consciousness, let's say. Uh, and even so, if something else is responsible for consciousness in our activities, then why even have why would nature, especially considering that a major portion, if not most, of the fuel that we consume goes to powering our brain. And then, of course, as a sort of creationary argument, in that something uh, I've talked about this before, are two alternatives, is that either something comes from nothing, or that something has always existed. One, of course, can make the claim that something came from nothing, uh, it just popped into existence on its own. Of course, of course, one would have to give a reason why that isn't still happening. Verse from popping into existence in the temple room right now. If one accepts the theory that the universe popped into existence by quantum fluctuations or something, or things that are contained in the universe and are less complicated. For example, a bicycle, a computer, ice cream cone, whatever. If universes could pop into existence, surely all of these things can as well. And then when, well, maybe the universe always existed. But then one has the issue of entropy, things tending towards disorder. Something is there for an infinite amount of time, it will always be in a disordered state. If it does matter, because when always the laws of thermodynamics, they are some of the most widely applicable laws in all of physics. So one has to say there's something different than matter that is the start of uh, everything. And then one has to uh, see, or the next logical step is that this substance created matter. That's matter came from that. And if one looks at the properties that the substance would have, they match the properties of spirit. But a good portion of them match the properties of spirits as or spiritual energy as elucidated or as given by the Bhagavatam. So while what's going on in this verse might seem fantastical, demigods coming in and out, adopting babies and things like that. Uh, this is actually, one can make the case that this isn't fantastical at all. That is just the way that the world works. And there are so many things that are fantastical in the modern worldview and modern science. For example, there's this famous quote. It's been attributed to different people. I'm not sure who actually said it first. I think it might have been Richard Feynman that said, if you, or maybe Dirac, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics because it is such a theory. It's a theory that, based on our intuitions, makes such ridiculous claims. Things are waves until you look at them, and then they become particles. And then you have things interacting over over large distances, and so many other things that don't make sense from our intuition. But people accept. Oh, quantum mechanics. It will, it makes sense to some people, and it makes sense somehow. So it's not that the Bhagavatam has a monopoly on outlandish things. There are so many things that people believe that are actually outlandish. So we should not be discouraged or confused by all these things, but we should recognize that actually at every level of existence, there is personalism, from the highest level to existence to the administration of the natural order, the laws of justice, that is karma, and all such things, and recognize that the ultimate reality is the supreme person, the supreme consciousness, and try to understand our relationship to that supreme person, Krishna, and perform devotional service. So I think I've run out of things to say. Any comments, questions, corrections?
I have a few questions, but I'm having trouble formulating them into words. Let me ask this. I've got an old friend who is a brilliant mathematician. He's taken a very casual interest in my practice of Krishna consciousness, and not just Krishna consciousness. He's looking at various philosophies. He has a little bit of an interest in Buddhism. He's not sure what to think. How, if you were confronted with such a preaching opportunity, an individual, such an interest, how might you try to appeal to someone like that? This is a mathematician who's kind of a pillar of logic and reason, but and I guess he regards himself as agnostic because he's just not sure what to think. And I guess, he tends to lean towards an impersonal understanding. What could you possibly say to appeal to such an individual? I recognize that this is kind of a challenging question, but I myself am, groping for a solution here. So,
I mean, I guess I can just talk about my experience, because I was kind of the same way. I guess at the time when I first got Bhagavad Gita, you might be able to consider me maybe agnostic, but very heavily leaning atheist. Uh, but uh, yeah, I mean, I think really a lot of it just comes down to reading the books and then having a knowledgeable like yourself to be able to answer questions in regards to the books. I remember when I first started coming, uh, I had those, like little sticky tag things. And anytime I had like a question or something when I was reading Bhagavad Gita, I would put little like sticky tag on the page so I could find it later. Then when I would meet with Mangalarti, I would just ask all sorts of questions. And there's a lot of sticky tags in Bhagavad Gita the first time I read through it. So yeah, I'm not sure if I know anything that uh just is the like way of preaching to scientists or mathematicians or something. But I guess one way of looking at it is try to convince them to go in without any preconceptions, uh, and not think that, uh, oh, because I'm a scientist, I have to believe this and this or that. I find that people accept things as what I've heard called package deals in philosophy. That, oh, because I believe this one thing or because I identify it this one way, I have to have this set of beliefs, right? Uh, I actually, just as a personal story, with this, I was talking with my mom not too long ago. I think one of the last few times that I visited, and somehow or other we got onto the subject of the moon landing. And of course, Parapod made different statements in regards to the moon landing. My own personal view is that, based on Parapod statements and other evidence, is that we never landed on the moon. But uh, my mom has said, oh, you're a scientist. How can you believe that? Because the idea is that as you're a scientist, if you're a scientist, you have to believe certain things. Uh, when in actually, my approach, I looked at the evidence, pictures from NASA and all the arguments on both sides and came to the conclusion, which is actually the more scientific approach. But people have these package deals. So I guess if you can convince this person or people like this to approach with an open mind, then that's probably the best chance that there is, because then they'll just be convinced by the philosophy if they're uh, intelligent enough to understand it and open-minded enough to be willing to give it the chance. So hopefully that gives some sort of answer.
yeah, that's helpful. I'm curious to know what books you read that helped you along from your condition of atheistic leaning agnosticism to Krishna consciousness?
Uh, Um, so uh the so when I say like atheist leaning agnostic, I really was basically just an atheist. I was maybe starting to consider the idea that there could be a God only because I was suffering so much that I thought, oh, maybe this will, maybe if I do something like this, join some church or something, it'll relieve my suffering. But so my Guru Maharaj's book, Hiding in a Natural Happiness, helped. But a lot of it was Bhagavad Gita, actually. Uh, and I remember actually very specifically theoretic acceptance, which is the supreme personality of Godhead. Uh, and I was thinking, okay, Harry Potter or something. I accept the context acts as if God exists. And then, of course, between that and then associated with devotees, taking prasadam, etc., I was eventually convinced.
May I offer a little something?
Yes, of course.
As far as the question from Taraka Prabhu, my experience with people like that are there. First of all, they accept empiricism and as the only valid way to prove anything, which by definition cannot prove itself because you can't prove empiricism empirically. So first you have to basically destroy the false basis of their understanding. And also the conditions that are imposed into understanding a proof are always from a scientific world is that things have to be controlled in order to be understood and experienced. Whereas when you are speaking about a superior being, you can't put it under your control. Just like if you want to talk to the governor of Pennsylvania, you can't just waltz into his office. You have to make an appointment with the secretary, and maybe you'll get an appointment. So if you're talking about the supreme person, you can't dissect them or just force them to perform an experiment for your convenience. You have to actually submit to their ways of revealing themselves, what method they want to choose. And Krishna chooses surrender and austerity and japa and many other things. So if you're not willing to undergo the experience that is proposed to you in order to understand the proof, then I don't think there is a point in trying to explain by any other means. You can be merciful, but you can't be naive. That's all I have.
Yeah, one has to undergo the process. I actually remember in a lecture by Sadaputa Prabhu, who's of course one of the great devotee scientists in our society. He actually said in a lecture before that it's very hard to preach to scientists because while a normal person you grab off the street, just an average Joe, they might just have a couple of reasons for being in Maya, right? Maybe they think they're the greatest thing ever, or they really like sex or something like that. But a scientist or a philosopher, they have this whole intricate web of ideas about that's keeping them in Maya, and everything's connected to everything else. And it's like, oh, what do you say about this philosopher or that scientific thing? And it's this whole web that's entangled, and it's a lot more complicated than just going up to uh want to say an average person, if one wants to use that terminology, uh and trying to get them out of Maya. uh
Thank you, Prabhu, and Sarvatma Prabhu. Thank you for your comments. Valuable food for thought.
Thank you.
I think we're just about
Yeah,
out of time.
it's 8:01. Doors are opening at a second. I heard for offering earlier, I think. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
So much. If you understand like this and this and this, read so.
Yeah, that's right along.
So is it a kind of PhD curriculum or is it just you?
No.